Something changed. You probably felt it. Maybe you couldn't name it at the time. Maybe you still can't. You're scrolling through your feed, post after post, comment after comment, thousands of voices, millions of interactions, an endless river of content flowing past your screen every single day. And then, somewhere between the third viral video and the 14th opinion piece, something feels off. Not broken, not wrong exactly, just hollow. Like walking into a building that looks completely normal from the outside. The lights are on, the doors are open, but when you step inside, no one is there. That feeling has a name now. Some people call it the dead internet theory. And the question it asks is simple and deeply uncomfortable. What if a significant part of the internet you use every day isn't run by people at all? The theory didn't begin with a scientist. It didn't come from a government report or a tech whistleblower. It emerged quietly, on forums, in comment sections, from ordinary users who started noticing patterns they couldn't quite explain. Why does everything online feel the same? Why do comment sections on completely unrelated topics seem to echo each other, word for word? Why does certain content explode overnight and then vanish, as if it was never really there? These aren't questions with clean answers, but the questions themselves are worth sitting with. Because if the internet is the primary space where modern humans exchange ideas, form opinions, and understand the world around them, then who exactly is in that space with us matters enormously. Let's look at what we actually know. The internet, as most people experience it today, is not what it was in its early years. In the beginning, the 1990s and early 2000s, the web was genuinely decentralized. People built personal pages. Forums were run by hobbyists. Communities formed organically around shared interests. If you posted something, a real person had to sit down and type a real response. That era had its problems, but it had one quality that's increasingly difficult to find today. It felt human. By the mid-2010s, something began to shift. Platforms consolidated. Algorithms replaced chronological feeds, and automated systems, bots, became a documented, measurable, undeniable feature of the online landscape. This is not a theory. These are facts supported by platform data, academic research, and official investigations. In 2017, researchers at the University of Southern California published a study estimating that between 9% and 15% of active Twitter accounts at the time were automated bots. Twitter itself, in filings related to its acquisition by Elon Musk in 2022, acknowledged uncertainty about the exact percentage of fake or spam accounts on the platform, a dispute significant enough to become a central legal issue in a multi-billion-dollar deal.
Facebook has reported removing billions, not millions, of fake accounts every year. In 2019 alone, the platform stated it took down approximately 5.4 billion fake accounts over 12 months. Read that number again. 5.4 billion in 1 year. And those are only the accounts they found. Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, LinkedIn, every major platform has acknowledged the presence of automated accounts operating within their systems. Some of these bots are relatively harmless: automated news aggregators, scheduled posting tools, customer service accounts that run on scripts. But others serve different purposes entirely. During the 2016 United States presidential election, researchers identified networks of automated accounts systematically amplifying specific political messages. The Oxford Internet Institute documented what they called computational propaganda, the use of algorithms and automation to manipulate public discourse at scale. This wasn't speculation. The accounts were real.
The amplification was measurable. The effect on trending topics was documented. Similar patterns were found during the Brexit referendum in the United Kingdom, during elections in France, Germany, Brazil, and numerous other countries. The use of bots to boost trends, flood comment sections, and create the appearance of widespread support for a position, that is confirmed. The exact scale of it? That remains contested. Here is where the documented facts end and the strange observations begin. Because what the dead internet theory describes goes beyond election bots or spam accounts. It points to something more pervasive, more structural. Users who began articulating the theory around 2021, primarily on forums like 4chan and later on Reddit, described something that's difficult to capture in a single statistic. A feeling that genuine, spontaneous human interaction online had become rare. That conversations felt scripted.
That viral content followed patterns too perfect to be accidental.
That the same ideas, the same phrases, even the same jokes seemed to appear simultaneously across completely unrelated platforms, as if seeded from a single source. One observation that surfaces repeatedly: comment sections on major platforms often show striking uniformity, not just in opinion, but in sentence structure, vocabulary, even punctuation patterns. Critics of the theory point out that this could simply reflect how algorithmic content curation creates echo chambers. People seeing the same things tend to repeat the same things. But others ask a different question. What if the uniformity isn't the result of humans influencing each other, but of automated systems producing content that was never written by a human in the first place? Here's something worth considering.
The technology to generate convincing, human-sounding text at scale has existed in increasingly sophisticated forms since at least 2019, when OpenAI released GPT-2, a language model the organization initially described as too dangerous to release in full due to its ability to generate realistic-sounding fake content. That was 2019. The models that exist today are significantly more capable. An automated account equipped with a large language model can now post comments, reply to replies, adapt its tone based on context, and sustain a conversation without any human involvement. There is no confirmed evidence that this is happening at the scale the dead internet theory describes, but the technical capability to do it, that exists. And it has existed for several years. There are other anomalies worth noting.
Some websites, particularly in the content farming space, have been documented as operating almost entirely on auto-generated articles, pages that rank on search engines, attract real traffic, and serve real advertisements, but contain text produced entirely by automated systems, with no human author. This is not new, but the quality of that auto-generated content has improved dramatically. 5 years ago, AI-generated articles were easy to identify. The grammar was off, the logic was circular, the facts were frequently wrong. Today, that gap has narrowed considerably. Some researchers have begun pointing to a phenomenon they informally call content collapse, where the sheer volume of artificially generated material begins to crowd out organic, human-created content in search results and recommendation feeds,
making it progressively harder for real human voices to be found.
This is where documented fact gives way to what some people believe, and it's important to be clear about that distinction. The dead internet theory, in its more expansive interpretations, suggests that the current state of the internet is not an accident. Some versions of the theory claim that the automation of online content is coordinated, that governments, large corporations, or undisclosed actors are deliberately manufacturing a synthetic internet to control the information environment at a population level. The argument goes something like this. If you control what appears popular, you influence what people believe is normal. If you control what appears in search results, you influence what people believe is true. If you control comment sections and social feeds, you influence what people believe others think. And if most of the voices in that environment are not human, if they are systems optimized to produce specific responses, then the public conversation becomes something engineered rather than something organic. Some people believe this has already happened, that the transition occurred gradually, somewhere around the mid-2010s, and that most users simply didn't notice because the change was incremental. There is no confirmed evidence for the coordinated version of this theory. What there is evidence for, documented, measurable, peer-reviewed, is that state actors and political organizations have used bot networks and coordinated inauthentic behavior to manipulate online discourse. The Internet Research Agency, a Russian organization, was indicted by the United States Department of Justice in 2018 for exactly this kind of operation. Whether that represents isolated incidents or early examples of a much broader system, that is a question the theory raises, but does not answer. A different version of the theory doesn't require coordination at all. It suggests instead that the dead internet is the result of pure economic incentive. Engagement drives revenue. Bots generate engagement. Auto-generated content is cheap to produce and profitable to distribute. Algorithms reward consistency and volume over originality and authenticity. In this interpretation, no one planned for the internet to feel hollow. It simply evolved that way, because at every step, the systems rewarded automation over humanity, and the humans building those systems followed the incentive. There are rational explanations for much of what the theory describes. Researchers who study online behavior generally point to algorithms as the primary driver of the same internet feeling. When a platform's recommendation system learns what keeps you engaged, it progressively narrows the content it shows you.
You don't see more of the internet. You see more of the parts of the internet most likely to hold your attention. Over time, different users in different countries end up in algorithmically constructed bubbles that happen to share certain features: emotionally stimulating content, familiar formats, predictable rhythms. The result can feel like a script. But the explanation may be optimization, not orchestration. Platforms also point to their active efforts to combat inauthentic behavior. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and others invest substantial resources in detecting and removing bot accounts. The sheer scale of the numbers they report removing suggests these systems do work, at least partially. The content collapse phenomenon has a more mundane explanation as well. The internet has grown enormously.
The number of websites, posts, videos, and comments produced every day is orders of magnitude larger than what any human could meaningfully evaluate.
Most content, by necessity, receives no human attention at all. What rises to visibility is determined by systems, and systems can be gamed in ways that human editors cannot. This doesn't mean the internet is dead. It may simply mean that the internet has grown past the point where human curation is possible. There's also a cognitive explanation worth considering. Humans are exceptionally good at pattern recognition. We find patterns even where none exist. A comment that sounds slightly robotic might be written by a tired person typing quickly on a phone. Viral content that feels artificially amplified might have simply resonated with a large number of real people simultaneously. The feeling that something is wrong is not the same as evidence that something is wrong. This is a distinction the theory's proponents and critics both need to take seriously. If there are reasonable explanations for most of what the dead internet theory describes, why does the theory persist?
Why do so many people encounter it and immediately feel that it describes something real about their experience? Part of the answer lies in history. The relationship between ordinary people and large institutions, governments, corporations, media organizations, has been damaged by a series of documented deceptions over the past several decades. People were told that surveillance programs didn't exist. Then, Edward Snowden demonstrated that they did, at a scale few had imagined. People were told that social media platforms were neutral tools. Then, internal documents from Facebook, from Twitter, from others, revealed that these platforms actively shaped what users saw, often in ways that prioritized engagement over accuracy. People were told that online manipulation was marginal. Then, election investigations across multiple countries confirmed that it was systematic, well-funded, and effective.
When institutions have been caught misrepresenting reality repeatedly, the skepticism that follows is not irrational. It is, in many ways, a learned response. There's a psychological dimension as well. Humans have a fundamental need to understand the environment they inhabit. For most of human history, that environment was physical and relatively comprehensible. You could see who you were talking to. You could judge their expressions, their tone, the context of the space you shared. The internet removed most of those signals, and in an environment stripped of those cues, where you genuinely cannot confirm whether the voice on the other side of a conversation is human, the mind will attempt to construct an explanation for the unease it feels. The dead internet theory is, among other things, a framework for that unease. It gives shape to a feeling that many people share but struggle to articulate, that something in the texture of online interaction has fundamentally changed.
That the spontaneity feels performed, that the reactions feel calibrated, that the outrage and the enthusiasm and the consensus all arrive just a little too quickly and a little too cleanly. Whether that feeling maps on to a hidden reality, or whether it reflects the natural human difficulty of adapting to a radically new kind of social environment, is not a question anyone can currently answer with certainty. The Cold War is relevant here too. For decades, populations on both sides of the ideological divide were subjected to systematic information management. Propaganda wasn't a conspiracy theory.
It was official policy, documented and acknowledged by governments after the fact. The knowledge that large-scale information manipulation is not only possible, but has been practiced repeatedly by sophisticated actors with measurable effect, creates a reasonable prior for believing it might be happening again, in a different form, through different channels.
But with the same basic logic: control the information environment and you influence the people inside it. So where does that leave us? The internet is not empty. Real people are still using it in enormous numbers. Real conversations are still happening. Real communities still form. Real ideas still spread. Real relationships still develop across digital distances. That is true. It is also true that an unknown but significant portion of what populates the internet, the accounts, the comments, the content, the engagement metrics, is not produced by humans. It is true that the technology to dramatically expand that non-human portion exists and is becoming more capable every year. It is true that economic incentives, political incentives, and strategic incentives all point in the direction of more automation, not less.
And it is true that the systems which govern what you see, the algorithms that curate your feed, rank your search results, and decide which voices reach you, are not neutral. They have been designed, adjusted, and optimized by organizations with their own interests. You are not browsing the internet. You are browsing a version of the internet that has been assembled for you. The dead internet theory may be wrong in its most dramatic claims. The internet may not be controlled by a coordinated network of artificial accounts managed by hidden actors pursuing a single agenda. But the question it forces into the open, about authenticity, about manipulation, about the gap between what we experience online and what is actually there, that question doesn't disappear, even if the theory is wrong. Because even in the most optimistic reading of the evidence, something has changed. The spontaneous, decentralized, human-driven internet of the early web is not what most people experience today.
What replaced it is something more complex, more automated, more curated, and more difficult to see clearly from inside. How many of your online interactions today involved a real person? Not a scheduled post, not an automated reply, not a piece of content generated by a system that has never experienced anything. Not curiosity, not fear, not the particular feeling of being alive on a Tuesday afternoon and wanting to tell someone about it. A real person. Can you be certain? And if you can't, if the line between human and automated has blurred past the point where you can reliably tell the difference, what does that do to the conversations you're part of? What does that do to the opinions you form? What does that do to the sense that somewhere on the other side of the screen, someone is actually there? The theory has no final answer. Neither does anyone else. So what is the internet, really? The answer depends on what you're willing to look for and what you might find.